Good evening and welcome to the Monday, October 11th, 2021 meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education. In accordance with the State Sunshine Law of New Jersey, adequate notice of this meeting of the Hillsborough Township Board of Education was provided on October 6, 2021 to the Hillsborough Beacon and the Courier News. Mr. Mahmood, may we have a roll call, please?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Mr. Kidd?
Here.
Mr. Marini?
Present.
Thank you. Mrs. Maroon?
Here.
Mrs. Nurse?
Here.
Mr. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Mrs. Stats?
Here.
And Ms. Trujillo?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Now, may I have, so whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231 of the laws of 1975 provides that a public body may exclude the public from that portion of a meeting of which the public body discusses certain matters for which confidentiality is required as permitted in Section 7B of the Act. Resolved by the Board of Education of the Township of Hillsborough and the County of Somerset and State of New Jersey as follows. 1, the matters to be discussed is a personnel matter. 2, the matters discussed in executive session shall be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. May I have a motion and a second? So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
I got that. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are now in executive session. We plan to be back here at 7:30. Thank you. Good evening and welcome back. We are back now from executive session. Mr. Mahmood, may we have a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Mr. Gillette?
Here.
Mr. Kidd?
Here.
Mr. Marini?
Here.
Mrs. Maroon?
Here.
Mrs. Nurse?
Here.
Mr. Oliver?
Here.
Mr. Pulsifer?
Here.
Mrs. Stats?
Here.
Ms. Trujillo?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. May we now please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the correspondence listed that we've received. And then we also had several emails before the board meeting that just came in earlier today. So which will be listed at the next board agenda. So I'd like to now turn it over for committee reports prior to opening it for public comment. And Mr. Gillette, if we could have the operations report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Operations met on October 5th. We first heard from Ms. Kathy Major. She's our food service representative from Sodexo. She answered some questions about food service program this year. As you know, we're providing meals free of charge to students, and something like I believe she said, correct me, I don't see these in the minutes, but I believe she said almost 90% of students were taking the meal. Does that sound right, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That is right.
that's
That is
an incredible amount of food that has to be prepared and provided for students. That would be not even close to that during a normal school year. We also had Mr. DeLuca from our maintenance facilities department, and he gave us an update on the referendum. All the projects are going as you would expect. He highlighted that the boiler at Amsterdam has been installed and ready to go. He also talked about the associated projects at Hillsborough Elementary School. The roof is nearly done. They're working on it in stages. He also talked about some damage from Ida storm. Particularly, we had Mr. Groman from EDI, Tim Groman, who's been at this board meeting before. You might remember him. EDI is our environmental consultant. He spoke about the damage that was sustained especially in the pole barn. Everything in the pole barn was taken out and cleaned. What couldn't be cleaned is going to be replaced. That's the weight room. So that's all going to be replaced. And it's going to be as good as new. In a related area, I'm going to skip around a little bit. Well, maybe not. Let me see. Where it is. I don't see. I can't find where it is. But the septic system at Woodfern is having some issues. That's going to be. Oh, it's at the end of the thing here. septic system at Woodford's having some issues. It's going to need to be I don't want to say replaced, but rebuilt. That can be done in stages. It won't require any disruption to the school. It just will require some money, as all of these things do. Lisa Bennett, our transportation director or supervisor, was at the meeting to give us an update on transportation. We know that transportation has been tremendously difficult this year. There are a lot of challenges, mostly stemming from I was going to say a statewide, but really nationwide driver shortage. This year, we're doing the best we can. I know people hate to hear that, and I hate to say that, but that really is the situation this year. I can say with confidence that they're doing the best they can in a very, very challenging year with that. Continuing our parade of professionals, Brian Riley from Centric Benefit Advisors was in to talk to us about new and different healthcare options. We're not anticipating any changes, but we're just doing our due diligence to see, to have him in at least once a year to talk about what's going on in the world of health insurance. You'll see also that if you've read the minutes, board members, that Mr. Mamu reported that we're making some accommodations so the dance team can actually have a team and have some space to rehearse and do what they need to do. They're working with Mr. Davis to make sure that they get that space and to be able to function as a team. There were about 10 policies to review. We only got through 4. These were the federally mandated policies about federal awards, internal controls over federal funds. Those will all be on the agenda tonight. We approved all those for first reading. And finally, Mr. Mahmood talked to us about the upcoming budget season. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Ms. Maroon, if you would give the Education Committee minutes. Thank you.
Sure. We met on October 6th. Most of what we discussed is going to be shared here tonight. The first thing we did discuss was the revised curriculum and a course title change. Basically just updated to reflect the new 2020 New Jersey Student Learning Standards. There was really no significant changes to the content that was in there. We also discussed the virtual plan, which will be seen tonight and reported out tonight. It was on the agenda. And again, this was a mandated policy by the state, basically, pretty much a template is what it was kind of, that we had to check all of the boxes to make sure that it was up to par with the state. And same thing with the policy revisions and the abolishment, again, to replace the road back, we're going for the road forward, which kind of makes sense. Again, mandated policy by the state, so it will all be reflected on tonight's agenda. And then we also got the presentation that you will see tonight on the learning maps that will be later on in the superintendent's report. So you will all get to see the learning maps. That's about all we got to.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Maroon. I will give the HR Committee minutes. There was a policy that was reviewed, and that policy is 1648.13 and will be on tonight's agenda about school employee vaccination requirements. There was an item about personnel, and there was also an item about the swim team and the swim coach positions. And there was a couple of other updates just regarding the testing process for unvaccinated employees, and then something about frontline security reviewing. It was just a question that the HR committee had, and security processes for frontline they look good. So that concludes the HR minutes, and then I will turn it over to Ms. Stats for the communications minutes. And also, I would just, prior to, if when board members speak, if we could just speak into the microphone. Kaz had reminded me last time that just makes it a lot easier for people in the audience and also those who are watching us for live streaming to hear us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Triero. The Communications Committee met on October 6th. Dr. Antunes shared that she looks forward to organizing Q&As with staff, students, and senior citizens, and then discussion continued on forming focus groups. Committee members shared that critical race theory and other related issues continue to be discussed and brought up at board meetings and on social media. Dr. Antunes shared that the curriculum is based on the state standards. If a teacher is teaching something in the classroom that is not based on the approved curriculum, the parent should follow the chain of communication and start the discussion by contacting the teacher. Dr. Antunes then shared that Mr. Vincent DeLucia, educator in residence for the New Jersey School Board Association, will be giving a presentation on implicit bias at a board meeting, most likely in November. Board members asked if a presentation about how diversity and racism issues are addressed in the district's curriculum could be given at a board meeting. Dr. Antunes recommended that such a presentation would ideally be given at a future board meeting after the meeting during which Mr. DeLucia will be given his presentation that was supported by the committee members. Terry Ann Zander, a consultant, attended the meeting virtually to discuss with the committee various specifics regarding a community-wide climate survey, such as what types of questions to ask and how to reach the various factions of the community. That's it, Ms. Trio.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stats. And I would like to now take a moment to welcome our new student representative, Ray Fofana. She is a Hillsborough High School junior. We are so excited to have you here on the dais with us. And in the future, at a future meeting, I invite you to share the goings-on at the student council or other student activities. We really would welcome hearing about that. So thank you and welcome. So next I have the approval of the September 27th, 2021 regular minutes. If I could have a motion in a second.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Marini. Thank you, Mr. Kidd. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Motion passed.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmood. And now, I would like to make a few comments before I open it up for comments from the public. Okay. So I wanted to remind the public that this is the board's business meeting where the public may observe the board conduct its official business. The public comment period is an opportunity for the public to comment and is not a public dialogue. I know that there are some members of the public tonight who would like to comment on the agenda, specifically the calendar. So what I want to do is kind of give everybody, those listening at home also, just a timeline of how the revision to the district calendar came to be. So first, as Ms. Maroon said, the calendar was discussed in Education Committee. And there were various, basically people kind of weighed in on what the calendar should look like. And I also this weekend, chatted with board members just to kind of get their sense of as where we would like to go. So going back, and I'd like, if the board members, I shared the current calendar with you so you can kind of take a look at it. The original calendar had us starting school on Wednesday, September 8th, but as everybody knows, because of Hurricane Ida, we lost some in-service days for staff for them to get into the building, et cetera. And because the administration had recommended that, I guess with consultation with the various staff, I would say, right? To give the best opportunity for starting the school year strong, the board agreed, or actually not the board, the administration recommended and decided to push back the start of school by one day to September 9th. And that was then September 8th was a now in-service day for staff. And we felt the board was in very strong support for that because we really just wanted to start the school year off as strong as possible. At the same time, board members were concerned about what to do about Election Day because at the time, the email went out and said basically the professional development day that was scheduled for November 2nd would be now flipped to September 8th. The email communication did not say anything about a student day, so we still have to make up a student day. And in Education Committee and among the board, in speaking with the board members, the board felt very strongly about keeping Election Day closed. And we do understand from the letters, and actually the superintendent did share with Education Committee the feelings of the association. So given that the board members all felt very strongly about having Election Day closed, then there were the options of how to make up that day. And so the options were to call November 2nd or September 8th, however you want to call it, an emergency day, which would then leave 2 emergency days left in the calendar, or to potentially use April 18th, which was the last day of spring break, and that would give the administration the preserving 3 emergency days. So in the conversation with the board, Some wanted to follow the calendar as was listed, basically saying that we would use an emergency day. Now we would have 2 emergency days left and just keep the calendar as is. And others did not want to use emergency days so soon in the year. And basically because nobody expected when this calendar was built to have an emergency on the first day of school, right? And given the uncertainty of the last year, it just does seem like a good idea to preserve more flexibility. So the calendar that's on tonight's agenda is a balance of that discussion, which is basically preserving 3 built-in emergency days. If you look at the calendar to my board, that the day that would be the 3rd emergency day, supposing that we use an emergency, would then be February 21st. If that was an in-school day, that basically gives 2 whole months from January 17th through the first day of through the first day of spring break in April, 2 whole months with no break. And the board really, really wanted to give the administration that flexibility to have February 21st as a day off. So that was the thought process for it. So in summary, the proposal on the calendar tonight is Election Day is closed. April 18th is now a school day, and this preserves 3 built-in emergency days. If 3 emergency days are not used, April 18th will be the first give back day. And so I think that covers the evolution of why we are with this calendar today. And I will, I'm going to go for public comment first, if that's okay. And then I will go for board comment before we vote on the action agenda. So now I will read the preface. We very much welcome input from the public. During board meetings, there will be 2 30-minute periods of time that the meeting will be open for public comment, where members of the public are invited to comment, which they may do so if they are attending in person. During the first public comment period, members of the public make comments about items that are listed on tonight's agenda before the board votes. During the second public comment period, members of the public may comment on any school or school district issue that a member of the public feels may be of concern to the residents of the school district as per bylaw 167. Before you state your comment, you will be asked to provide your name and address. There is a 3-minute limit on public comment. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board believes there is a misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent may address the comment. There may be times when a member of the public makes a comment or asks a question about personnel or hiring decisions. Kindly note that the Open Public Meetings Act and the privacy rights of public employees encompassed therein do not permit the board to discuss personnel issues in public session. And so now I will open the public comment for items on the action agenda only.
Good evening. Good evening, Henry Goodhue, Hillsborough Education Association. I would like to comment on the calendar discussion prior to the board taking a vote on that. I appreciate the timeline that was laid out. And I appreciate, look, I'm a Hillsborough parent myself, so I appreciate safety concerns. I honestly do. But I also appreciate making a plan that provides flexibility should there be further occurrences and further issues, and taking that Monday is now essentially taking our 4th emergency day away from us. When we could create a calendar with a half day on the 2nd and ensure that we maintain not only our emergency days, but we maintain flexibility should we have more than 3 emergencies throughout this year. The other reasons that I would like to speak to this are, we met with our governing body tonight, which is our rep council, and there was largely universal agreement that this was not only the safest plan, but also the most educationally appropriate for our students. I realize that there is concerns about safety, so I looked at the 4 sites where we'd be doing this. If we were to use a half day, the high school media center would be closed. There would be a controlled entrance and exit, and no one would be able to get out into the regular school where the students were. HMS would have a controlled entrance, most likely with a police presence there, because we've seen that at all the other voting times we voted. Auten Road, with voting would be taking place in the cafeteria with a controlled entrance and exit. Doors would be locked and no one would be getting into any other areas where students would be. Amsterdam admittedly presents a little bit more of a challenge, but if we go to Amsterdam, there are changes that can be made in the back of the building. We can move certain objects in the back, create handicapped parking back there, and use the back doors on the cafeteria to ensure that no one actually gets in or out of anywhere other than the secure location. All locations would have police presence there because that is historically what we've done. If we close on the 11th, on 11/2, as President Trujillo said, we are actually undermining our own ability to be flexible and to provide consistency, because Easter Monday, most students who are planning to travel will still travel. But parents were largely under the impression that we were going to be present on the 2nd. So they planned to be here. Now we're closing, and now those students technically lose 2 days. Also, shortening our break in the midst of COVID possibly creates a situation where we're cutting down on travel time for families, so they're going to be forced to make a decision as to whether or not they go see people, go see their families, have a break, or if they end up in an extended period of quarantine. So by taking that Monday, we're actually increasing the amount of time that our students could be away from the classrooms versus adding a day where we know most students will be present. I know my time is up. I would just like to say that I strongly urge the board to reconsider this. It is educationally best and can be done safely if we have a half day on the 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Thomas Gatto. I don't think this was on the agenda, but I'm not quite sure. Please, put me in the right place if I need to hold off. But I'm standing here to ask about the courtesy busing. It's not a question, it's just a comment that I'd
So,
like to
excuse
make.
me, Mr. Gatto,
Yeah.
if you would hold your comment for the second public comment session, which we will be taking comments on the budget.
Okay,
Thank you.
Hi, Jean Bates, special ed teacher at Amsterdam School and secretary of HEA. I would like you to reconsider the changes that you have made to the calendar. Back at the beginning of the school year, there was a lot of change already. Parents did have the understanding that we would be in school for Election Day. Many of them have asked questions to teachers. Teachers have responded that yes, we would be present. They have changed their travel plans, and we don't know what the winter is going to bring. I think to set ourselves up for multiple days that we need to change the calendar again, to make those decisions in October, I think is not responsible of this board. Please reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on the action agenda? Okay, seeing none, then I will close public comment and turn it over to this, well, actually, is there board comment on the action agenda? I know we will talk about the calendar when we get to education, but if there's anything in general now on the action agenda, go ahead, Ms. Nurse.
Can you clarify what you mean by we'll be talking about it when we get to?
So
Are you
when
waiting for-
we make a motion for education, we will split out the calendar because I know that there will be, let's see, it is motion, section 9.10. So we'll take a motion for education and then split out 9.10 and we can have a discussion about that.
All right, so
Thank
I'll
you,
wait
Ms.
until
Nurse.
then. Yeah.
So I will now turn it over to the superintendent for the action agenda.
Thank you. The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the education agenda 9.1 to 9.9 as follows. Motion to approve the revised curriculum and the course title change. Motion to approve the virtually remote instruction plan as mandated by the DOE. I'd just like to note that this plan will only be implemented during district closure lasting more than 3 consecutive days due to a declared state of emergency, declared public health emergency, or directive by the appropriate health agency or officer to institute a public health-related closure. A motion to accept the funds from the security grant application is listed. Motion to submit the application for Individuals with Disabilities Act American Rescue Plan. Motion to affirm the HIB case attached. Motion to approve policies for first reading and abolish the policies listed. Motion to approve the final staff member being paid by FY22 ESEA Title I funds. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Marini. Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Any discussion? Mr. Pulsifer.
I know with a mask, it's hard to tell it's me. A question regarding the virtual remote instruction. As you stated, as superintendent stated, this is only to be used and extended. Does that mean that one of the things we talked about last year was the fact that, it would be nice to have the flexibility using virtual on a snow day or something like that. Is that still legally not an option for us at this point?
Correct. Not an option at this point. Today. That could change, but today it is not an option.
Like tomorrow morning, you'll get a phone call. Good, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we vote? Ms. Stats.
I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but the criteria for using virtual day, isn't it like there has to be at least 3 days?
At
And has to be approved by the state?
It's
There's all
got to
this-
be mandated by the state,
Right.
not approved. It's got to be
Right,
mandated by
okay,
the state.
so-
They tell us.
Right, so it's not something that we can just willy-nilly apply or use for quarantine or
Correct.
anything like that? Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other board comment before we vote? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Mahmood, if we could have a roll call, thank you.
Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mr. Kidd?
Yes.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver? Yes. Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes,
Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Motion to approve the revised calendar for the 2021 to 2022 school year.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Thank you, Mr. Marini. Any board discussion? Ms. Nurse?
I wanted to say that up until about 6 o'clock this evening, I did read the emails coming in about the concern of having off on the 2nd. And as a parent and as a teacher, I definitely understand the want of preserving the Monday after spring break off. I know how important that is to families, especially if you're traveling for the holiday. As an educator, I definitely believe in the instructional continuity for our students. I think that is important. November, unfortunately, notoriously, is a bit choppy with conferences and other things. But originally, it was supposed to be a non-instructional day. So I do have to say I was a little taken aback by calling it irresponsible of the board to make this decision, because above all else, and my personal ones as a parent or as an educator, is the safety and security of our students and our staff. We have been so encouraged to make sure that we are as safe and secure as possible in light of the past decade and what's happened, unfortunately, in our schools. And to have children and staff in a building that is supposed to be securely locked on a day where we're inviting the general public in at will, for me is very irresponsible. So I know it's disappointing to have to manipulate the calendar as such, but I feel that security and safety above all else is what is guiding my vote tonight.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nurse. Ms. Stats?
I'm sort of a person who really is big on following the rules, because that protects us from making irresponsible decisions when it comes to, emotional situations. But, this was, Ida was an unexpected occurrence. So I then welcomed the idea of not just following, okay, according to the current calendar, we have November 2nd off, so that's going to stay. And we're going to use the emergency date. We're going to use that, our first emergency day. Well, I think that would be irresponsible. And I think it seems like that is one thing we're all in agreement on, trying to keep the 3 emergency days, because Man, when it comes to emergency days, snow days, there are so many factors the superintendent has to deal with. I mean, even as a teacher, I certainly did not envy that. And just adding one more problem by reducing the emergency days so early, that would be a problem. But in addition to the safety and security of our staff and students on Election Day, I believe it's been shared that some of the spaces that that are used for Election Day are now being used as overflow because of the problems caused by COVID. So that will have an effect on instruction if our schools are open. And we're talking about 4 schools. It's out of our control now, it's out of everyone's control, but looking forward, hopefully next year we can have some other spaces used as polling locations, spaces that aren't used for anything else. Schools are used for education, and it's a shame that they're being used to for other purposes when there are additional spaces that can be used. But I do support our decision, but at the very least, I do want to have 3 emergency days remain. But I do think the having April 18th open, as a school day, there will be that whole week beforehand that can be used as vacation, and it's certainly plenty of advance notice for staff and students' families.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Is there any other board comments before we vote? Seeing none, Mr. Mahmood, if we could have a roll call, please.
Sure. Mr. Gillette?
No.
Mr. Kidd?
No.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver? Yes. Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
And Mrs. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the Human Resources Agenda 10.1 to 10.17. Motion to improve retirements and resignations, and I'd like to point out Patrick Donnelly on his almost 30 years prior to him leaving us as our health and phys ed teacher at Auten Road in January, and Kathleen Mutz, instructional assistant, who's been with us for 17 years. Motion to approve revised leaves of absence. Motion to approve revised leave replacement teacher. Motion to approve revised appointments. Motion to approve revised transportation driver's hours. Motion to rescind an employment contract. Motion to approve a contract change as listed. Motion to approve leaves of absence. Motion to approve appointments as listed. Motion to approve mentor. Motion to approve the co-curricular intramural webmaster advisors. Motion to approve 6th and 7th period coverage. Motion to pre-approve extra coverage. Motion to approve extra coverage. Motion to approve group changes and extended media center hours. And motion to approve the policy as listed for first reading.
Thank you, Dr. Antunes. May I have a motion and a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Any discussion? If not, Mr. Mahmood, if we could have roll call?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mr. Kidd?
Yes.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver? Yes. Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve the operations agenda 11.1. Motion to approve the policies listed for first reading.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Any discussion? Seeing none, if we could have a roll call, please?
Surely. Mr. Gillette?
Yes.
Mr. Kidd?
Yes.
Mr. Marini?
Yes.
Mrs. Maroon?
Yes.
Mrs. Nurse?
Yes.
Mr. Oliver? Yes. Mr. Pulsifer?
Yes.
Mrs. Stats?
Yes.
Ms. Trujillo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I'd like to turn it back over to the superintendent for the superintendent's report.
Okay, as we are all aware, due to the effects of Hurricane Ida in early September, start of school was delayed by one day, requiring us to revise the district calendar. As Mrs. Trujillo said, after reviewing various options, the Board of Education is recommending and has approved that school will remain closed on Election Day, November 2nd, and will now be open on Monday, April 18th. Should 3 built-in emergency days not be utilized, we will close on April 18th. We will send out the revised calendar in a school messenger and it will be updated on the district website tomorrow. Congratulations to our 9 high school students who were named commended students in the 2022 National Merit Scholarship Program. About 34,000 commended students throughout the nation are being recognized for their exceptional academic promise. They have demonstrated outstanding potential for academic success, and on behalf of the Board of Education, I wish them all the best as they continue their pursuit of academic excellence. I'd like to offer the congratulations, and I will apologize on the front side if I mispronounce anybody's name. Luke Carlson, Dia Kalavala, Alexis Matthew, Dia Patel, Maya Patel, Ryan Patel, Daya Rahul, Manav Subramanian, and Dev Trivedi. This coming Saturday, October 16th, the Hillsborough High School Band Parents Association will be hosting the 27th Annual Hillsborough Raider Marching Band Festival. Over 10 bands will be competing, and the Marching Raiders will perform their 2021 show titled The Haunted. Everyone is certainly welcome to attend. Tonight's board agenda does include public input on the 22-23 budget, and stakeholders may also submit their input on the district website. You'll see that button there tomorrow if it's not already there. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kim Feltry, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, who'll be presenting on the Spring 2021 Dynamic Learning Maps and Assessing Comprehension and Communication in English State to State for English Language Learners, which is the access test that our ELL students take, those results. So let me bring that up. Okay, it's Dr. Feltry.
Okay, good evening. Tonight, I am presenting the results from the Spring 2021 administration of the Dynamic Learning Maps, or DLMs, and Assessing Comprehension and Communication in English State to State, or the Access Assessments. These were the only assessments that the state offered and required to be administered in the spring of 2021. Next slide, please. The DLMs were administered to students with the most severe cognitive differences. As the DLMs were in-person only assessments, they were only administered to students who had chosen the hybrid option. The DLMs were administered for literacy and math in grades 3 to 8 and grade 11, and were administered for science in grades 5, 8, and 11. As this past academic year posed significant challenges to both teaching and learning, we are mindful of the fact that the results of these assessments may reflect the atypical circumstances for instruction and assessment, more so than student performance and mastery of the standards. Results should be viewed with this in mind. To protect student confidentiality, the sample size for reporting results is a minimum of 10. Since this is an assessment for our students with the most severe cognitive differences, and this was an in-person assessment, we had less than 10 students test in each subject area per grade level. Therefore, results have been grade banded for literacy and math, and science is reported for all 3 grade levels. As is reflected in the table, 27% of the 15 students assessed in literacy in grades 3 to 5 were at target or advanced, and 26% of the 19 students assessed in literacy in grades 6 through 11 were at target or advanced. 44% of the 16 students assessed in math in grades 3 to 5 were at target or advanced, and 30% of the 20 students assessed in math in grades 6 through 11 were at target or advanced. Of the 11 students assessed in science in grades 5, 8, and 11, 1% were at target or advanced. The Assessing Comprehension and Communication in English State to State, or Access Assessment for English Language Learners, assesses students in grades K through 12 for their English language proficiency. The results of the data inform language instruction for English language learners. The proficiency levels shown on the right side of the slide ranging from entering through reaching. When students reach an access for ELL's proficiency level of 4.5 or higher, they are exited from the ELL program if multiple criteria support the decision. As this past academic year posed significant challenges for both teaching and learning, we are mindful of the fact that the results of the access may reflect the atypical circumstances for instruction and assessment, more so than proficiency of the English language. Results should be reviewed with this in mind. As a reminder, to protect student confidentiality, the sample size for reporting results is a minimum of 10. Since the access was an in-person assessment and we had less than 10 students test per grade level in grades 4 through 11, the data was combined for reporting purposes. In our ELL program, we tend to have more students come to our district in the early grades and they exit as they progress through their school years. This is reflected by the data in the table where we have more students in the entering and emerging proficiency levels in our youngest grades and greater numbers of students at the expanding and bridging levels in the older grades. Since an access for ELL's proficiency level of 4.5 or higher is required for exiting a program, if multiple criteria support that decision, we have very few students who test at a reaching proficiency level before exiting the program. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Feltry. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Feltry. Thank you, Dr. Antunes. And let's see, now I would like to open it up for public input on the 2022-2023 budget and public comments on any other item. Oh, okay. So I will read the public comment statement again as a reminder. We very much welcome input from the public. During board meetings, there will be 2 30-minute periods of time that the meeting will be open for public comment, where members of the public are invited to comment, which they may do so if they are attending in person. During the second public comment period, members of the public may comment on any school or school district issue that a member of the public feels may be of concern to the residents of the school district as per bylaw 167. Before you state your comment, you will be asked to provide your name and address. There is a 3-minute limit on public comments. Please understand that our public forums are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. In instances where the board believes there is misunderstanding or inaccuracy, the board president or superintendent may address the comment. There may be times when a member of the public makes a comment or asks a question about personnel or hiring decisions. Kindly note that the Open Public Meetings Act and the privacy rights of the public employees encompassed therein do not permit the board to discuss personnel issues in public session. With that, Mr. Fenster.
Thank you. Bob Fenster, Hillsborough High School social studies teacher. At the high school, we have hundreds of students on academic teams like debate, robotics, mock trial, the math team, and the academic team. For many students, these activities provide the most meaning to their high school experience. It's what they live for. A few years ago, the Robo Raiders began a campaign to get varsity status for these academic teams. The Board of Education voted unanimously to support this proposal in 2018 and admitted that the recognition was long overdue. The message this board sent that night was that they valued academic teams as much as the athletic teams. Unfortunately, I'm here tonight because the administration is not following through on that position. We've been told that academic teams will not be allowed to compete in person with other schools. Hillsborough seems to be the only school in Somerset County not allowing academic teams to compete in person. The rationale we were given for this decision was twofold: continuing concerns about COVID and the shortage of bus drivers. While I don't readily dismiss concerns about the health and well-being of our students, our participants can wear masks and do not need to come into close physical contact with their opponents, unlike in sports activities. When you have athletes sweating on one another from different schools, it's difficult to take this reason seriously. The driver shortage is a significant problem that has led to an array of issues. Since last year, the administration has allowed parents of athletes to sign waivers and provide transportation for their children. That could easily be an option here. Now, today I learned that the superintendent has permitted sports to proceed because in order to have an athletic program, we must follow NJSIAA rules. Will the same logic prevail if the Somerset County Bar Association or First Robotics only provide in-person competitions? We've been told that the subject may be revisited in the future, but it takes extensive planning to go into the preparation for these competitions, and not knowing makes it impossible to plan. I ask the administration to reconsider the decision and to do it soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Hi, board members. Thanks for your time here. So I'm here to ask you to.
If you could just state your name again
Oh,
for
yeah,
the
I'm
record.
sorry. Name's Thomas Gatto. I'm a resident of Hillsborough.
Thank you.
So I'm asking you guys to look closely at the courtesy busing that has not been funded now for a couple of years. And I'm asking you to look at it a little bit differently than you have in the past. So it's not really working, the proposal that you put forward for subscription buses. So the courtesy busing is essential for the children within the 2-mile radiuses of the middle school and the Hillsborough High School. If you're outside of that radius, you don't currently get busing. With the courtesy busing, they would. And if you look closely at the demographics around our schools and the lowest income and maybe the, not the best standing communities in Hillsborough, they're all impacted by not having courtesy buses. So I think if you keep that lens on this and you take a look at the courtesy busing situation, you'll see that your proposal to have people pay for a subscription bus, $1,000 a year, is not necessarily going to get anywhere because a lot of those families really are at a hardship. So I ask you to keep that into consideration when you look at courtesy busing and funding for 2022, 2023. Also, just to mention that, the walk is not a small walk. A 2-mile walk with anywhere from a 15 to 20 pound or 18 pound backpack on a kid. For my daughter and son, that's probably around, well, it is over 20% of their body weight. And they are at that 2-mile mark for walking to the middle school and probably close to that for the high school as well. That's 20% of their body mass. Trucking that backpack through inclement weather. 4 out of the 9 months of the school year reach 32 degrees or below on a fairly regular basis. So there's a lot there. The other aspect I just wanted to call out on this topic is the households that are impacted. So regardless of socioeconomic conditions in the household, there's also a consideration for families that have a single parent at home or families that have 2 working parents and the impact on them. So please consider that in the future.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thanks.
Goodhue Jimenez, 348 Gemini Drive, apartment number 3, Hillsborough. Can you hear me well? Good. All right, so I'm here because of a subject I really didn't want to come here for, but it's CRT. I miss the days when CRT was just a type of TV, but it's not anymore. As some people might not even know that this has been around since the 1970s. Even Frederick Douglass contributed to the whole program of CRT, trying to teach about racial justice. And I come here because I heard one of our board members, Mr. Gillette, mention one of the sources that he put out about an article with an inflammatory headline about CRT. And, we all looked into it to find out what it is. Now, one of the things that I found out through researching it was and I'm sure he likes history, I like this too. a short educational film put out by the U.S. War Department in 1943 and re-released in 1947, which warns Americans against repeating the same mistakes of intolerance made in Nazi Germany. It emphasizes that Americans will lose their country if they let themselves be turned into suckers by the forces of fanatism and hatred. And this is the same issue that we're dealing with right now, because if you look into the sources of the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, and numerous ones that are connected together, they are funded by the Koch brothers. And funny enough, a week ago, another institute funded by the Koch brothers put out an article saying, hey, we should hear out CRT. And this is clearly what that educational video was talking about, how we're being played by people who are billionaires, and they want us to fight with each other right now. Now, CRT is not the reason we got opiates in Hillsborough and class of 07 lost a lot of people. CRT and racial healing, even though it's not taught here in this level, and I understand it's more of a college class, it's not the reason that our wages are low. Racial healing is not the reason that blue-collar jobs are being sent overseas. So I acknowledge the pain that a lot of community members are going through. I acknowledge that things are bad. We went through 3 meltdowns with the economy, probably a 4th one and a 5th one, but we are focusing our anger in the wrong thing. We are being played, and just like our own government said in 1943, don't be a sucker. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment.
Jean Bates, Amsterdam School, HEA Secretary. I appreciate your concern for the well-being of our students and the safety of them. And I think we can all agree with Mrs. Stats that it's a shame our schools need to be used for election. I would like to remind you that our schools were open on June 8th for primaries. So if security is a concern, it needs to be a concern every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ryan Nose. I live at 11 Bennett Road. I'm a freshman at Hillsborough High School, and I was team captain for the softball team at the middle school, and I'm looking forward to playing at the high school. I'm here to talk about the inequality in sports. According to highschoolsports.nj.com, the Hillsborough varsity baseball team went 2-20, and the Hillsborough varsity softball team went 21-3. That means that the baseball team won 2 out of 22 games, putting them last in the division, and the softball team won 21 games, putting them third in the division. I lied, second in the division. So now knowing that, what team do you think has the better fields? The team that placed last in the division, or the team that played second in the division? The normal distance from the home plate to center field, according to the NCAA, is 325 feet at a normal high school softball field. The varsity team is playing on a field that is 200 feet. The baseball fields are normal distance, 365 feet dead center. The softball dugouts and fields are covered in weeds and dead plants. You may argue that the fields are like this because it's fall and not softball season, but baseball season is the same as softball, in the spring. Take a look at the baseball fields now, in the middle of the fall. The grass is a beautiful green and cut nicely. The dirt is well raked and weedless. The baseball dugouts are cemented and painted versus the softball dugouts, which are benches with poles behind it and weeds all around and inside it. The baseball team has a whole sprinkler system. An average sprinkler system costs about $9,000 to install. This isn't including the water bill, which would cost about $432 a year to run the sprinkler for half an hour 3 times a week. Why don't you spend that much time, effort, and money into maintaining the softball fields? Since the softball records stand on its own, is your reasoning for not doing the same for softball teams is because it's a girls' team? We're speaking now about how important equality is in culture and academics. What about gender in sports? We watched as the whole debate in equal play at the women's U.S. national soccer team unfolded and how wrong it was. Why are we letting it happen in our neighborhood? If this doesn't open your eyes to how unfair girls' sports are being treated in Hillsborough, I don't know what will. You still have time to make it right. We would like to see proper dugouts that have coverings and no weeds in them. We would like to see raked, weedless dirts. And we would like to see the same amount of dedication that is put into baseball, into softball. Thank you for your time. I also shared with you guys a slideshow with pictures of the baseball fields and the softball fields. So
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Good evening, Henry Goodhue, Hillsborough Education Association. I would just like to clarify a couple of comments, similar to what President Trujillo would do if there were misnomers made. And frankly, I feel that there were in the calendar discussion. So you took my time already? I'm pretty sure I can complain about that.
Thank you.
So, thank you. There was a comment made that we need to make decisions not based off of emotion. And I would like to clarify that at no point did myself or my associate or any of my representatives who weighed in on this and came to consensus on it, none of these were based upon emotion. These decisions were based upon what we know professionally to be best for our students and what we know to work in terms of providing continuity within the schools. And as Ms. Nurse noted, actually give some more consistency in a month that is incredibly inconsistent. So emotion came nowhere into this conversation at all. In fact, it was based purely upon years of professional knowledge. Now, there was also a comment made about voting taking up the overflow rooms. I'm not aware of any overflow rooms currently being used in our buildings. This is not an overflow room. This is a lunchroom now. The media center at the high school is not an overflow room. That's a lunchroom. Any overflow in the high school is contained in the commons, which would not be used. Overflow rooms at Amsterdam used to be the cafeteria and the gym, but they're no longer being used because we have the full student population in, so it is nothing other than a cafeteria. So were we to use a half day, we would not be impacting any overflow rooms because honestly, they don't exist anymore. We're dealing with a full student population all the time in the midst of a sub shortage, and we don't have the ability to do overflow rooms like we used to. Now, the other thing that I would say is we have a responsibility, right? There was issue taken with the use of the word irresponsible. Irresponsible means a lack of responsibility. The board has a responsibility to ensure continuity within these schools and that they run properly. The board made a decision that has already hamstrung us moving forward, and ultimately, if there are more closures, we will have lack of continuity. And that lack of continuity will impact travel times. It'll put the administration in a position where they now have to say no to staff members who pre-planned during the summers for this because the calendar was released. So this is not advance notice to anybody who already had plans, staff or students or parents. We also have a responsibility to make sure that we're hearing out all stakeholders. And there are some amazing students who came out tonight to speak, and I applaud them for that. We have a brand new representative on the board who could speak for the students, and at no point did the board ask for student input on this to see how they would feel about this. We have a responsibility to listen to all stakeholders. We have a responsibility to ensure that graduation isn't impacted, but God forbid we have another awful flood, a hurricane, or a snowstorm, and we're out for a week. We now have no choice but to add days on to the end of the year or start taking away from other holidays, which quickly will go away. So the board has a responsibility to make decisions based off of the current paradigm and the current situation, not the previous one. And I will remind you that we did have primaries in here, as my associate said, and at no point did the board raise concerns about safety or shut down schools at that time.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gowrie Nair. I live at 46 Browser Way. I have been a part of the HHS debate team since I was a freshman and have had the unique opportunity to meet people and hear different perspectives through conferences. And this year, I have the privilege of being a mentor. The first year I was in HHS debate was the first year it was made an academic team. Many of the people that I mentor this year are sophomores and freshmen, and they haven't had the chance to experience a regular school year, let alone these competitions that I believe are essential to the culture of this academic team. Academic teams are differentiated from clubs because they compete and represent the school and district in local, state, national, and sometimes even international competitions and conferences. Not giving students the opportunity to compete are not only a disadvantage to them in comparison to their peers in neighboring towns such as Montgomery and Bridgewater, but also prevent them from having a full educational experience that they've already been robbed of these past 18 months. Many of the kids that I mentor have not been able to have the full experience of clubs that form them as people. Personally, HHS debate has been essential in determining what I want to do as a career and with the rest of my life. And I think that along with HHS debate, as well as the many other clubs that were listed by Mr. Fenster, and I'm sure will be spoken by my peers, have formed a lot of our opinions and perspectives about the world, and not being given the opportunity to compete in the future, especially this year, I think is a great disadvantage to all of our students at the high school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Yee. I live at 37 Branderson Court, and I'm currently a senior, and I'm an executive of the High School Science Olympiad, which, by the way, I've been a part of since 7th grade and is not an academic team. And I want to start by saying I think it's ridiculous that I need to be standing here to speak about the travel ban on academic teams when I have my first college application due this Friday and a calc test to study for. The Township Public Schools mission statement clearly says that the district is committed to providing a superior education to all students. Preventing hundreds of students from pursuing their education and their passions is clearly against this. I think Mr. Fenster has already made it pretty clear how illogical the decision is, considering that sports like football are allowed to continue. So I'd like to speak a little bit about what being a part of an academic team has meant to me in my high school years and just all of my years throughout school. Plainly put, without Science Olympiad and being able to attend competitions, I wouldn't have discovered my passion for marine science. I've learned and grown an unbelievable amount from my experiences with Science Olympiad as much as I have from school. I've seen my team make school history. We placed third in the state for the first time in entire history, and my sophomore year, we placed that state for the very first time. And last year, we actually beat out our longtime rivals, Montgomery, for third in the state, and we have a legitimate chance at making nationals. Yet, we aren't even treated as an academic team, and we receive no funding for our builds, for our competition, outside competitions and invitationals that we attend to better our team. And I think it's pretty evident that athletics have been prioritized over academics. In general, international Olympiads like Bio Olympiad, Chem Olympiad, all of them receive no public attention, and students are not even informed of it. And it's not incorporated into the school systems, and students aren't made aware of the opportunities that they have to pursue their passions, to further their education, and discover what really matters to them. And that's ridiculous. So I invite you guys to really reconsider your decision and remember what this township is about and what this education system is about. It's about providing a superior education to all students, not just athletes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Sir, if you could please put back your mask on while you're speaking. Thank you.
Good evening, all the board members. My name is Andy Wang. I live in 2 Running Street, Hillsborough, long-time Hillsborough resident. I'm here to strongly support what the first speaker, Mr. Fenster, and also the two students just mentioned about the academic team to compete. I don't quite understand the policy in terms of travel. The sports team, they are encouraged, they're supported by the school, by the district to allow the travel, while the academic teams don't have this option. That doesn't sounds reasonable or fair to me, right? The students, they have the strong, I know my daughter is part of the Saudi team as well. She's so passionate to work with her peers to pursue academic excellence, to compete for the township, and they actually earn the reputation for Hillsborough High School in terms of the ranking of the Saudi teams. We should, as the residents of Hillsborough, we should be proud of this case, trying so hard, work together, spend a lot of time, their personal time over the weekend to learn, to pursue the academic excellence. It's very bad that COVID got rid of the opportunity to compete in person already for a long time. Now things getting better. We have vaccination. The state policies are encouraging people to reopen to normal. There are policies everywhere, including school, to have the physical distance and all those necessary procedures to encourage or guarantee to protect well-being of the students. Students are open spread anyways. They are sitting next to each other in the cafeteria, in classroom. I just don't quite understand what's the difference is for them to travel, to go to sit in the bus, and then compete in a classroom where they as well can wear masks. They can still keep physical distance with other team members, especially if the travel is allowed for the for sports team. I don't really get the rationale why the athletic teams are not given the option. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mitasha. I'm Hillsborough resident. I'm a parent of a sixth grader in Aries. And the request we are going to make has been mentioned already in this meeting today, but we want to repeat this from our side. Our request in today's meeting is courtesy bus for middle and high school must be provided. We are not getting bus service even if we are ready to pay for subscription bus service. It's very difficult to drop and pick kids up, especially for working parents, as it takes a lot of time because of crowd as well of buses and other cars during school beginning time and school ending time. Also, it's not very safe for kids to walk home. We heard many occurrences of cars following kids and taking pictures when they walk alone after school hours. So please, it's a request to reconsider this decision of providing courtesy bus to middle schoolers and high schoolers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Susan Anderson, Case Drive, Hillsborough. As you know, in the past couple of weeks, there have been several of us that have spoken up at board meetings about our concerns with implicit bias, critical race theory, social emotional learning, and so forth and so on. Fogging up here. So I'm happy to hear that the board has heard us and has talked about bringing a gentleman in sometime in November, you said, to talk about bias to the public. However, this should not be a skim the surface overview of bias, of SEL, of DEI, and of CRT. We have got to dig much deeper. We need to see how the sausage is made, whether we're talking about a state mandated curriculum or an elective. We need transparency on the resources, how they are selected, who reviews them, how many levels of scrutiny are there, who reviews for balance and fairness in these resources. I've spoken before about an elective at the high school that was glaringly skewed far left. There wasn't one moderate or conservative viewpoint within that entire course. That's the responsibility of the board, especially the education committee. I have asked multiple times of administration how this course with those resources got through all levels of scrutiny. I haven't gotten an answer yet. I have no idea. This has to be addressed. We're asking questions. We're taxpayers. We need to know how these resources get to this district, who is choosing them, who is allowing them, who is gauging them for fairness and balance and perspective. If we're to truly give our children an education that's fair and balanced, this is the starting point. And I think from what I've seen so far, we're failing miserably. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hello, my name is Basima, and I'm here to support my other neighbors who were asking for the courtesy busing in the neighborhood. We live within 2-mile radius, and my son is a 7th grader now. So I feel the pain when we are going every morning, picking the kids up. Today we received an email, the kids were going up to Rita's and all that stuff. So everything can be limited if we have a proper protocol, get us the courtesy busing. We have all, including my neighbors, have requested for the subscription. We tried it, we failed it, we haven't gotten the budget yet. So we did our part by paying what we did, but the busing wasn't available. And if we can get it for the next year, it will help us. The kids are having big backpacks, inclement weather, everything. It will be helpful, and the kids would know that they have to come home. Parents would know, they wouldn't wander around. They are preteens, teens. Kids wants to be an adult, but they are not. I do see kids in my neighborhood biking to the schools and coming back from high school, and I don't think that is safe. They are speeding up, they're not stopping at proper. If anything happens, we as parents, teachers, Board of Education, if any kid falls off, anything happens, it's a loss for the whole public, for the whole society. So here to help them and get this courtesy busing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim Jordan, 201 Brokaw Court. I wore a different hat today, thought maybe you wouldn't recognize me. I wasn't here last meeting, but I've been here a couple other meetings. I'm here to talk about critical race theory, and my question I've been asking for the last several times I've been here is how the heck does this happen? How does this get into the school system? Now, I walked in a little late, but I heard one of the board members say that if there's a problem with one of the curriculums, that we should address the teacher. Is that right? Should we address the teacher? That's what was said. I just need to confirm that.
This is not a question and answer session, so you'll make your comments, and then when public
Well,
session closes.
how are we going to know? I mean, that's what she said. This woman here, I can't read her name, Evans, I can't read her name. Anyway, that's what she said. Is that what we're supposed to do? Is that where it starts? We email the teacher? Just a yes or no,
Mr.
please.
Jordan, this is not a question and
Can
answer session.
can someone email me or call me or let me know that's where it starts, for crying out loud? I mean, we need to know where it starts. I've been asking this question for the last 3 times I've been here. Where does it start? How many people do I have to come and bring here with me to stop this nonsense? Because that's what it is. It's nonsense. I mean, I heard someone talking about BLM flags in classrooms. The federal government was one step short of declaring the BLM as a terrorist organization when they supported Cuba, which is, the last time I checked, is a communist country. Are there ISIS flags hanging in the classroom too? I'm just going to ask the question. I hope not. So that's all I want to know. I mean, this critical race theory stuff is getting out of control. It really is. And this woke board, okay, I guess is supporting it. I guess, I don't know. I mean, this is something that I'm really surprised. I've been coming to these board meetings for many years. I took some time off, but now I'm back. And I can't believe that this is where we're at. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to email the teacher. Or who should I email? Should I email the superintendent or somebody? Who do I get in touch with? Someone give me an answer, please. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Gowrie Nair. I live at 46 Razor Way. I don't believe that when I came up here before, I got to express my full frustrations with the inability for academic teams to compete. I think the biggest issue is that, as Jonathan said, we aren't being treated equally to sports. I think the issue comes when sports are given priority busing and we're not. I think that many of my peers and I have discussed, why don't we just open up busing and let whatever team pick priority? I think it's an issue when HHS Debate has won Rutgers Model Congress almost 20 years in a row and won Best Large Delegation, and this year we might not have the chance to do that. It's a part of our school's culture. It's a part of our, done already? No? Okay. It's a part of our school's culture. It's a part of our students' culture, and it's an essential experience to every high school student's culture to be able to participate in these academic teams. and preventing us from giving our up-and-coming freshmen and our sophomores who just re-entered the building and have a normal year the opportunity to do so is preventing them from having a high school experience at its core. I've joined Model UN and Model Congress, and now I changed my entire career path, and to prevent someone else from doing so is heartbreaking to me. Having the opportunity to join these clubs, these academic teams, and compete, meet other people from different places is essential to growing someone's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comments. So if anybody else would like to speak, would you please line up so we can have a sense as to how much longer? I think we are past our 30-minute mark. Is that right, Ms. Rodriguez?
We're right on it.
We're right on it. Okay, so, sir, if you would, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, it's Jonathan again, but I want to add really quick, in terms of budgeting and stuff, I know the school, the school district is, struggling with that a little bit, but I just want to talk about, in terms of academic teams, there are a lot of grants that we can apply to, if we are given, the sort of, status that we deserve as academic teams. I know this year, as one of the fundraising and outreach officers, I was looking to apply to grants and, get more funding because the school doesn't provide us any funding. So, and it's honestly, at the very least, if you're not going to directly fund us, you should be able to support our attempts towards getting ourselves funding and, being able to support ourselves. Because, I think it's a little bit odd when you're not letting a team that has the potential to compete at nationals and represent this state and represent this school and represent this district on national level and even state level. It's a little bit odd to me. And honestly, I just want to say that, in terms of academics, a lot of people try to they gloss over and sort of there's always stereotypes and stuff. It's these kids, they just focus on school and all that kind of stuff. But it's a lot more than just being a nerd and studying, It's you develop senses of community, you build bonds, you build passion. It's just the same as an athletic team. So just please, I encourage you to reconsider your decision on the channel mandate and also sort of look into supporting academic teams and being able to get themselves funding, at least at the very least, try to support themselves. So yeah, thank you. Good night.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other comment from the public? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comments. And then I would like to thank the students for coming out tonight and speaking and expressing your thoughts. We really do appreciate hearing from our students, and you guys did a great job, very eloquent and very passionate about the things that you support. And also, I thank you for advocating for yourselves. So with that, I would like to turn it over to the board for any comments. Mr. Kidd, and then Mr. Gillette.
I wanted to comment not just as a board member, but as a college student. I really think that trying to get busing or options of transportation for academic teams is incredibly important. From my experience as a college student currently post-COVID or in the pandemic, there are a lot of different extracurricular, academic or not, activities that have struggled because of lack of leadership. And I think that ensuring that both academic and athletic teams have as much participation as physically possible by our students and staff is of absolute importance for not just the students in this district, but once they move to the next steps of their life, whether it's secondary education or their career, and being able to use those skills of networking and working with their peers.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Mr. Gillette.
Yes, so let me start with busing. If you've been coming to these meetings like Mr. Jordan has for many years, you probably have heard me say this before, but I feel, and I think the board feels, I know the school principals feel that a school bus is the most efficient, best way to bring kids to school. They have hundreds of parent drop-offs or pickups in the afternoon or kids walking. It's the best. So we're dealing with two issues here with courtesy busing. One is an issue from a couple of years ago where we needed to save some money from that so that we wouldn't have to have layoffs greater than we did, and we had some significant layoffs that year. And the second is this year, when we might want to bring it back, there are just no drivers. It is just incredibly difficult, and you've seen it not only affect, this will affect our discussion this year as we go into the budget season. We'll have to forecast if the driver situation looks any it's going to look any better. Unfortunately, we forecast it to get worse before it gets better. I think that's what we said at the last operations committee meeting. The driver shortage make it worse before it gets better. And this not only impacts the discussion about courtesy busing going into the next budget, but also, as we've heard tonight, affects somewhat the academic teams, but also athletics. And I know there have been maybe 1 or 2 instances so far this year where a transportation crunch has occurred for athletics, and we've worked to, with, I guess, the athletic director has worked to find alternate transportation, I think, through the use of parent waivers. I would encourage the central administration and the high school administration to work with Mr. Fenster, any other advisors along those routes. And all we're allowed to do is encourage it as a board member. So I'm just strongly encouraging them to please work the same way we've worked, the same way the athletic director has worked when we've had a crunch on buses on a couple of occasions with sports teams, so that they can participate in those events. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Ms. Nurse?
I would like to echo what our 2 other board members said, that I do think it's very important to see what we can do for our academic team so that they can compete. I look forward to those conversations in our committee meetings. In terms of the courtesy busing, that is also something that I find very important. And we hopefully will continue to have those conversations in our committees. The restraints we have because of the bus drivers themselves is definitely an issue. But I would definitely like to see courtesy busing back. And in terms of the election, and I know people brought up the primaries, and I believe that safety should be first no matter what the day is. I would like to say that. I really feel, if you feel strongly like I do, that we should be at the township council meeting so they can help us figure out what to do to get the kids, to get the elections out of the schools. I think that should be a priority. But until that happens, we have to do what's best safety-wise for our kids. I do tend to disagree about kids missing the week that we get back from spring break. I think it's more likely that many people, if they are vacationing during the school year, do it that week of November. So I still do feel comfortable that we are off November 2nd, but I encourage you to talk to the Township Council so we can get the elections out of the schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nurse. Ms. Stats?
When I was, my first year on the board, I underwent new board member training. And I remember the very last day, the meeting of all the participants, Mr. Vincent DeLucia addressed inequities with, especially comparing athletics and other extracurricular activities. And so that really hit me at that time. Up until that time, I sort of took it all for granted. Oh, well, that's how it is, but I don't want to accept that. I am concerned, even before this current incident, about addressing inequities, at least as far as costs and expenses, comparing athletics and extracurriculars. And with respect to academic teams, that's academics. That's the closest thing as far as extracurriculars to why we're here, why school buildings exist, why our students are called students. So I am concerned that we are restricting what our academic teams can do, and in the sense of fairness, and also providing a broad learning experience. I hope we can rectify that problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Ms. Fafana?
Good evening. I'd like to address some of the comments made about critical race theory. From my experience as a student and as a student of color, in my classes, when race has been mentioned, it hasn't been critical race theory, and I completely understand the concern regarding pushing a political agenda, but when race has been brought up in our history classes or in our English classes, the only intention of my teachers has been to broaden our perspectives and enhance our education. So I think discussing race itself should not be misconstrued as critical race theory, while I completely understand that it is controversial and we don't want there to be animosities between the students. I think it's also fundamental to our learning, and it's just something to consider moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate that. Ms. Stotts.
Wow, that was fantastic. And I think what's important is we're talking about experiences of our students here, not experiences or hypothetical situations regarding other districts in other parts of the country. We have students here that have spoken about racist speech, treatment within our own district. These are our own students that spoke at a meeting in the spring, I believe, and these are middle school students, a small component of many students that have experienced racism. One of them said that she had a head covering, she accidentally bumped into somebody, and the student immediately yelled at her, called her, used expletives, and called her a terrorist. I have witnessed examples of racism in the schools and also in the township. And I'm white, and I've witnessed it. So I believe people of color, what they've experienced. I myself have never, I don't have cancer, but I believe people who attest to that, who have experienced it. When I hear people of color describe instances of racism, I believe them. It is happening now, and as was so eloquently stated, it needs to be addressed in the classroom. For many years, it hasn't been, at the expense of all of our students. And it is part of reality, and I'm glad that there is a balance as it is being discussed in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stotts. Is there any other comment from the board? Oh, John, I'm sorry, Mr. Oliver.
Keep passing me over.
John, close to the mic.
So this was actually this was a great meeting. I love when students come up and they talk to us and they tell us what's going on, because it's somewhat difficult to make decisions. We talked about June 8th as a primary date. I remember going to vote at Amsterdam School and walking in the school in the back door to vote in the primary, and it was an oppressively hot day. We were in experience with like one of those, June heat waves we were going through. And I thought to myself, this is ridiculous that the school is open. So I looked at that as a mistake that we had the schools open on June 8th for the primary. Now, whether or not we had a choice or not, I don't know. But I think we took the best alternative to close this election day. I think it's just safety. And I appreciate all the comments tonight, but unfortunately, we had to make a tough decision. As far as the academic clubs, Greg can help you with this. I think Mr. Chitterelli addressed this dais at one point in time about 4 or 5 years ago about the varsity letter for robotics, and ultimately long overdue, but it came. So sometimes we need to be reminded that academics is just as important as athletics. And I don't think there's anyone on this board that feels differently about that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'm hoping Ms. Maroon at the next education committee, I think that's where it would go, immediately looks at this and tries to rectify it. We had this situation happen about 3 years ago with the dance team. It took a long time to get them varsity letters. We got them varsity letters. So we are cognizant of it. We hear it. We do not want to discourage academics at all. So why they're not traveling, the busing is one issue, but we have a solution for the busing. Parent waivers. So, we have to think outside the box, but we need to have these students experience those situations. I don't think, at least I hope, that we're not differentiating girls softball from boys baseball. I hope not. But it was kind of funny because those comments were pretty succinct to me tonight. I ran into a couple of gentlemen that I know that are involved in boys baseball. And I know a lot of the boosters in baseball, they were putting up signs, rent a Raider. You know, hire the baseball kids, they make a couple of bucks for the team. And the booster parents are very, very involved in helping get the fields ready. So they do a lot of the cutting, they do a lot of the trimming. I would say that if you're having some trouble getting the fields ready, get the boosters involved. Maybe work with the boys baseball, maybe the booster boys baseball until you can get the girls softball booster. But keep bringing it to our attention because it's as important as boys baseball. I'm sorry. Girls softball has a great record. They have a great team. They have a great coach. So we don't want to discourage any form of athletics. So this is a great meeting. We got a lot of information tonight and very, very poignant comments. So I thank everybody for that.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Mr. Gillette?
John reminded me of, that I wanted to say something about the girls softball field. So I think the board is aware, at least I'm aware, that the girls softball field isn't all that it could be or should be at this point. It hasn't, but that because the state of it doesn't indicate how much thought we've given to it almost every year. We just recently, well, not recently, within the past COVID era, all the time runs together during the past 18 months, but we did have a proposal for significant improvements on the softball field. Mr. Mahmood, nod if I'm stating correctly. And we did examine that, and that isn't the first time that we've looked at that. I would say that it just bubbled under the budget a couple of times now. We looked at various things that were sort of outside of the referendum. The high school track was more in need at that time, but now that's done. I think, Mr. Mahmood, you can agree, I think, to this, that the girls softball field is now bubbling up near the top of facilities that need another look. We have looked at it, and I apologize that in the past few years that we haven't been able to do anything about it. And I agree with John that volunteers, I do believe, work on those fields, and I want to thank them also for all the time that they put in, so that the kids could at least play, even though it's not all it could or should be. That's all I have on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Any other board comment? Mr. Pulsifer?
I thought twice about bringing this up, but I think it's something that I'm concerned that we've had a number of things we talked about tonight, academic teams, the softball team versus the baseball team. And a couple of times I heard the success of the team as justification is why we should do something. I think it's really important that we should not be looking at any of this based on whether or not a team is successful or not. We should be having these programs because they're important programs to have. And I don't think people necessarily intended it that way, but all too often I hear discussions in the public, outside of board meetings, about how awesome this team is doing and how we need to do X, Y, and Z for that team. Are we suggesting that if that team had a losing season, we wouldn't support them? I mean, I think we really need to be careful that we don't make decisions up here, and certainly that when we talk about these teams, taking care of the academic teams, which we actually absolutely need to do, but we shouldn't do it because they represent us so well, potentially at the national level. We should do it because it's a great educational opportunity, regardless of how they fare. And I think it's important that when we have these discussions, that we, especially we as a board, remove any measure of success or failure of a particular team from our evaluation of whether or not a program is something we should do, how well we're doing in terms of equity and fairness. We should never be looking at this as a question of success or failure, because while we've had teams that have had great runs, those same teams have had years when they weren't very good, let's just say that. We didn't cancel those teams, and we still support those students when they're doing it. So I just think it's important that, while I understand people's perspective, and I don't think it was meant in a negative way, we have to be very careful about evaluating whether or not we should have a program or how much to take care of a program because it is either currently successful or not successful. We should be doing these things because they're important programs to have and great experiences for the students. Even if they never win a game, never win a competition, they're still important and we should do them regardless of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pulsifer. Mr. Oliver?
I'm sorry, and I forgot one last point. So, we're getting a lot of dialogue with the CRT, and just to clarify, if I was a parent and I had a problem with something that was being taught in the classroom with CRT, I would go to that teacher first. If I did not get a good answer, I'd probably go to the principal, the vice principal, and I would bubble it up. Oftentimes someone comes to a board meeting and we're hearing something for the first time. It's very important to kind of follow that chain of command, because then if you follow that chain of command, we have very specific instances we could look for. I would have a problem if there was a BLM or an ISIS flag flying in my child's classroom. So I'd want to ask the teacher why it was there. I'd then ask the vice principal, and I would go up through the chain. So that's what I would do as a parent.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Not yet, Mr. Gillette.
Did you hear that?
Any other comments?
I thought the mics didn't work.
Okay, so I have.
I hit the mic by accident.
Mr. Kidd.
Just on all the topics around just both the academic teams, the softball, and the courtesy busing, I just wanted to thank everybody from the public and the board who spoke here this evening. I personally, as well as all the board members, really appreciate it. Even if the desired decision of any individual constituent didn't happen tonight, every comment not just informs our current decision, it helps improve our future decisions. So I just wanted to thank everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Kidd. So I wanted to take a moment, if there's no other comments from the board, so I wanted to address some comments from the public. I think, Mr. Oliver, you did already to Mr. Jordan with respect to the district's communication chain. That's on the district's website. If you go to https.us and then you drop down from Board of Education, it's the very last drop down. It says district communication chain, and that's where you can find the recommended district's communication chain. So we would recommend that you start there. With respect to the comments on tonight on academic, athletics, et cetera, again, I appreciate very much students coming forth and advocating for themselves and for their fellow students. I would like to remind, or I guess acknowledge, Dr. Antunes, if you can maybe elaborate. I do believe that these are administrative decisions. These are not board level decisions. We do absolutely appreciate hearing from students, and I think that does inform the board. However, this is not a board level decision. Okay, so affirmative. So I think it's absolutely something that we can discuss, but at the end of the day, it is an administrative decision. And that's kind of where board members, as we get our school board's training, the things that the board reviews is responsible for, right, is setting and adopting the budget, right, number one. It is negotiating with our associations, adopting policy, and then evaluating the superintendent. So those are the four main areas. We have our public board meetings so that you can see us do our business in public. You can make comments at the dais if you're in public. You are always welcome to email the board with your thoughts. We try to respond, but again, there are many emails that we receive that really are not best addressed by us. I think better addressed starting with the district's communication chain. Okay, so I have a few announcements and I will be brief. Hillsborough Education Foundation, of which I'm a board member, is having an ice cream fundraiser tomorrow, so I had to remind you, from 12 p.m. to 9:30 at the Ice House. So that is a fundraiser that supports Hillsborough Education Foundation, and that fundraiser will then go back to supporting our Hillsborough Township Public Schools. Also, as a reminder for school board candidates, tomorrow from 7 to 8:30, there is a virtual school board's training on what it is to be a school board member and all the things that you will be doing when you are elected. On Thursday, it's an invitation from my fellow school board members. Somerset County is having its meeting, and the topic will be on cybersecurity. So I hope that you'll be able to attend. It will be at Thursday, October 14th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Somerset County VOTEC. It'll be in person, and there will be a virtual component. And as I've done in the past, I also want to close this meeting by thanking everybody for their just taking the time here tonight to exercise your right to come and speak and view the public meeting and express your thoughts to the board, and also for being civil and expressing yourself thoughtfully. I think that all of this conversation on the board was very well articulated, and it also I think, models for our students that people can differ in their opinions, but do it respectfully. And so, again, the district's priority is keeping our students and staff safe for learning in person full-time. We've done that, and we look forward to 158 more days of school. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Good night.